Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls. I hope you're all well. Rod Fleming here in the Philippines, and today we're going to talk about, are feminists masculinized? Right? Are they actually possibly a form of sexual invert? Before we get into that, please remember that we definitely do need your financial support. We really need it. And I ask you, I beg you, humbly, to go onto one of the funding sites, which I am just about to put the URLs up for, and please send something. It doesn't have to be much. Some people have sent substantial amounts of money, and I'm really touched by that. It's really like, I'm impressed, you know. On the other hand, even if you've only got 2 or 3 quid to stick in the pot every month, if you find my stuff interesting, and a lot of it you will not get anywhere else, you will not get people telling you the truth the way I do, then please put your hand in your pocket and make it possible for me to continue. And now on with the show. Are feminists masculinized? Now this idea, surprising as it may seem, comes from a study that was done, which I'll put the links to later on, which looked at the difference between finger length ratios, right, and feminist identification, self-identification. And the researchers studied a group of women who were attending a feminist conference, but they also had control groups from women outside these. Now, just to explain the digit length ratio issue, the lengths between this one and this one, right, that's digit 2 and digit 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 2D and 4D, is a strong indicator of whether the person we're looking at is actually male or female. And it has long been argued that sexual inverts have a digit ratio that's much more like the opposite sex. And this is certainly often observed in transsexual women and in feminine gay men. Now, the argument that these researchers took, and what they wanted to find out was something similar apparent in feminists? Did they find that in the feminist lobby group that they had 2D, 4D ratios which were approximated more closely to those found in straight men? And guess what? Yeah, they did. That's exactly what they found. And this, the researchers suggest, might answer what's known as the feminist conundrum. Which is, and that to explain it, is that feminists claim that their sole purpose is to make life better for women and to help women. Yet, only between 7 and 10% of women, depending on the survey, self-identify as feminists. Most women do not identify as feminists. And most women actually find feminists far too shrill and hostile. They don't like them. It's not even just self-identifying. There is an issue of they're uncomfortable around strongly feminist women. And what the researchers were looking at was to see if this was the kind of thing that, did it have deeper roots than the kind of thing that you might feel if your second cousin suddenly became a born-again Christian, and was there a deeper thing going on here? Were these women actually masculinized, and in such a way that other women would read this masculinity and say, maybe they're not real women? Now, the researchers, who were led by Guy Madison and came from Umeå University in Sweden, I don't know if that's pronounced right, you know what the Swedes are like, they took this 2D, 4D digit ratio and they collated it with a personality trait known as dominance. It's not one of the big 5, but it's still a measurable trait. What they found was that the sample, this is of the feminists, exhibited significantly more masculine 2D, 4D and higher dominance ratings than comparison samples representative of women in general, which was their control group, obviously. And these variables were furthermore positively correlated in both hands. They were the same on both sides. The feminist paradox, that is, why do so few women identify as feminists when feminism is supposed to be about being good for women. It might, they say, be explained by biological differences between women in general and the activist women who formulate the feminist agenda. And in other words, this might be something similar to the way that straight men feel about the new gay man. You know, he appears to be a man, but he's actually a woman. And it might be something like that happening here, where, you know, we're talking about people who might well be lesbians, but in fact they appear to be women, but actually they're more like men. And this could be making women somewhat nervous of them. It's understandable, you know. They, for example, say that between 5 and 40% of women, depending on the nature of the sample, identify as feminists. Nowhere is it a majority. Most women do not see themselves as feminists. And that doesn't, they might well say, oh yes, I mean this particular thing and that particular thing, that's all to the good, but they don't identify as feminists. They don't want to know. They like men. Probably why. Even, they say, a prominent women's college, 32 out of 70 responses were clearly negative towards feminism. Right? So that's in, you know, the most woke, one of the most woke liberal arts colleges, entirely populated by women, taught entirely by feminists. And you've still got nearly 50% saying, no, I don't want to have anything to do with feminism. It's not me. So, you know, there is a problem there. And this idea that it might be something to do, I'll stop reading from it now because I know it disturbs people. This idea that it might be something to do with a kind of sexual inversion, which is revealed by the 2D, 4D digit ratio and by the dominance trait results, would kind of explain that. Because, you know, one of the things about both men and women, you know, just to recap over stuff we've already done, but it's worth recapping anyway. Men and women are evolved to live in completely separate groups. We're not supposed to be living together all the time. We're definitely not supposed to be working together all the time, and that causes a huge amount of problems. As Jordan Peterson said, this is the biggest social experiment that humans have ever carried out, certainly, and I would say certainly since we started living in cities. And we don't actually know how it's going to turn out now at the moment. We don't know if it's going to be successful. We still don't know. And I would have to say that looking at the history of experiments like this, the prognosis is not good. But anyway, given that men and women are not evolved to live together, there's a certain, amongst men, there is a reluctance to have a woman within the male group, within the men group. And there is strong reluctance amongst women to have a man within the women group. And it's possible that this extends not just to, you know, men who actually have a penis, but to masculinized females. That they make, feminine females feel really awkward and their presence is unnerving. They don't like it. So this is a possibility, that what we're looking at in feminism is, it's a lot more complicated than we thought, because, you know, feminists have been trying for many years to try to say, you know, it's just all about equal rights and all that sort of thing, you know. And we know this is a lie. The equal, you know, in the West you can't legally pay a man more than a woman for the same work. It's completely illegal. It'll get you to jail. You know, women have had the vote for 100 years in most Western polities. There's no argument left on equality. There's no rape culture. We punish rape really severely. You know, men's lives are ruined even on the allegation. The allegation of rape is enough to completely destroy a man's life. There's no rape culture. You can't have a rape culture when you do so much to destroy rape and prevent it. You know, if it was a rape culture, you'd be encouraging it. We don't. That absolutely do not do that. And anybody who tells you that you know, Western culture does encourage rape is a liar, an absolute liar, because it's simply not true. There is no culture in the world where rape per se is even condoned. Never mind, it's completely condemned, and some with penalties of death. You know, there's no rape culture, there's no inequality, there's no gender pay gap, none of these exist. So you then have to ask, what the hell is feminism for? And it might be that feminist women are simply trying to make women just more like men. And in a way, it's not that they're so much trying to eradicate masculinity, although that's a byproduct, but actually their first attack is to eradicate femininity. Because it would appear that what happens is that feminists, and as we say, we're looking, and we think, this might suggest that we are looking at a group of women here who are sexually inverted, that they're actually really men in women's bodies, that they are repulsed by ideas of femininity. They're repulsed by that idea of looking feminine, of being beautiful, which for most women is actually a very important thing. They spend a lot of time thinking about it, they spend a lot of time doing it. And I've discussed this before, but a long time ago I did a fair bit of research on various Amazonian tribes. And one of them is called the Thui, and there are videos on YouTube, or there were, very good ones about the Thui, and they don't wear clothes, right? But the women still beautify themselves. They still wear buzzard down headdresses, and they do their hair, and they wear a kind of makeup, and they wear a body colouring, kind of red colour that they produce from a plant, which they consider to be beautiful, right? So women are beautifying themselves. That's even in cultures where they don't wear clothes. It's no fashion industry or anything like that. It's just that they want to be beautiful. Most women want to be beautiful. Most women want to be appealing to men. And where women are not doing that, I think what's happening is that other women are going, why are you like that? That's a bit weird. Isn't that a bit strange? That you don't want to be beautiful, that you don't want to attract men. Who are you trying to attract? Because everybody knows gender can't be got rid of. Gender is real. So if you don't want to be feminine, what is it you do want to be? And in being so, who are you trying to attract? And it may well be that the feminists are trying to attract, it could be that the feminism is actually based on there's no such thing as patriarchy in terms of the general society. There is within men-only groups, but what do you expect? They're all men. There's no women in them. Excuse me, moustache here. It could be that the women who are doing this, who are trying to destroy femininity, which is the feminists, by the way, paradoxically enough, are actually, they're terrified of masculinity, of real masculinity. That scares them. That frightens them. And I find that really interesting, that what is actually happening here is that feminism is not the result of absolutely spurious suggestions about inequalities in society which don't exist, right? They just don't exist. They were all got rid of 50 years ago, between 40 and 50 years ago, all gone. There's none left. So what motivates feminists? And you're left with only one thing, and that is hatred of men, hatred of masculinity. Why do you hate something? Because you fear it. Because you fear masculinity. And I've done reading feminist literature is extremely unpleasant because, most of these people are not actually in touch with reality. But in doing so, it's fascinating how often you see the same phrases repeated, violence, dominance, brutality, patriarchy, as if this completely categorizes and describes the society we live in, which it doesn't. Most societies are not violent. I mean, they might be defensive, they might be violent outside themselves, but within themselves, no, they're not violent. Even really macho societies, no, not violent. Violence is caused by social circumstances which are abnormal, right? In normal social circumstances, men are completely peaceable, and they find ways to get rid of their natural aggression, which testosterone does produce, which are not permanently damaging, like they play football, or they play running games, or they go hunting, or they do competitive stuff, all of which replace actual violence as a way to bring down the pressure of testosterone. Yet what is it that feminists most want to eradicate? It's exactly those sports, those kind of safety valves that men have evolved in order to keep the peace, which is basically what it is. You know, it's all right, we won't go and attack the next village and rape all the women there, we'll just have a game of football instead, eh? Who's got the ball? I tell you what, use your jacket as one goalpost and I'll use mine as the other, and we'll just play shooty in. That's what men do. That is actually what men do. And so I think we have to be very careful about what's going on here. And I think it's fascinating that we find evidence here suggesting, very strongly suggesting, that feminists are not like ordinary women. Feminists are actually, in many ways, much more like men. You know, the digit ratios don't exist in isolation. What's happening here is that we're talking about a group of people who are actually masculinized across the board, because they've got the dominance things, and men do tend to dominate. That's one of the things that exists within male hierarchy, although women never understand how men express their dominance. They don't understand it, they don't get it, because it's not all done through violence. In fact, most of it isn't done through violence. You know, you'll find that men who are particularly good at things are highly respected by other men, even when these things have got nothing to do with any kind of violence. I mean, men who are good at playing the guitar, well, just ask any teenage boy, and they'll tell you, yeah, you know, well, I don't know what they do now. They've been so demasculinized that I guess God knows what they think now. It's just sad. But that's what's happening here. So, very interesting study that's basically supporting the case that that feminists are not actually, they're not really women at all. Which is an interesting point, don't you think? I do. I think that's interesting.